Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first Tech Tuesday of 2019. My name is Richard Spidell. I'm the GSA's Chief Privacy Officer, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this presentation that we're about to have on the Digital Analytics Program and what it can do for federal privacy professionals. Before I turn it over to our presenter for today, I just wanted to make one or two general announcements. As I said, this is our first program of 2019. We're presenting this in a slightly different format than what everyone might be used to. We're pleased to be joined by our Digital Government University colleagues who are helping us put this on through a slightly new format. This is through the YouTube Live format, we're excited about that, and we want to explore opportunities for further using this system and service. So I'd encourage you to please provide any feedback that you might have on the audio quality, video quality, whatever it may be. Please feel free to use the chat box that you'll see accompanying the slides. The last announcement I want to make before I get to Tim and his bio is just to announce to the members of the Technical Training Task Force that we now have a new co-chair in place. I'm pleased to announce that James Bird of DHS's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection group is the new co-chair. He's replacing Michelle, who I want to thank for all her good work on the task force, but very excited to welcome James. He's not able to join us for this Tech Tuesday, but the next time he's available, I'll have him introduce himself. Okay, so now that my general announcements are taken care of, I want to turn and introduce Tim Loudon. Tim manages the federal government's Aggregated Analytics Initiative, which we shorthand as DAP. DAP is a really important tool because it helps federal agencies understand how end users are interacting with their information and services. We all share a mission to make that delivery of services and information as easy and seamless as possible, and DAP is critical for that. Tim oversees training and support for over 3,000 users of this program. We hope that this presentation will net a few more, and Tim can talk about that some more, but this is a really good opportunity to start learning or further developing topics in web analytics. Tim offers virtual seminars as well as on-site workshops. So with all that, I'd like to warmly welcome Tim Loudon of the DAP program.
Thank you, Richard. That was a very, very kind and generous introduction. Hi, folks. I'm happy to be here to speak with you today. Again, my name is Tim Loudon. I'm the program manager for the Digital Analytics Program. We're also joined on the call today by my colleague Freddie Blicker, who is going to be involved in the chat box that you hopefully should see on your screen, whether you're watching either on the DigitalGov page or the YouTube page. There should be a chat option for you. So if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to enter them there. Freddie is going to answer some in the chat box and also relay some to me at the end of the presentation. So what are we going to try to talk about today? What are the questions we're going to answer? Firstly, I want to give you a background of what the Digital Analytics Program is, or what you'll hear to me affectionately refer to as DAP. I think that most people in this audience working in the federal privacy world are probably not folks that are very involved with the Digital Analytics Program so far. Maybe you are, and if you are, we're really glad that you're here. But if not, I want to let you know what we do and how it can help you as a privacy professional as the second question. And then finally, I'm going to speak a little bit off of the DAP program specifically and just kind of give some general thoughts on things that you should keep in mind about privacy with web analytics tools, being that we manage a pretty large implementation of Google Analytics here at GSA. So firstly, what does DAP do? The main thing, the big thing, is that we offer agencies an advanced web analytics tool at no cost to the agencies. So what we do here at GSA is we procure a Google Analytics 360 account, which is the paid version of Google Analytics. And for those of you who might not be familiar with Google Analytics, it's a tool that helps you understand the amount of page views the pages on your websites get, how long folks are spending on your website, like how they got there from either google.com or from Twitter or from referrals from other websites, and also the kinds of technology that folks are visiting your websites on. So just recently, we crossed a big threshold. A larger percentage of visits to the 5,000 participating federal government websites on DAP, the majority of visits are now coming not via desktop. So mobile and tablet combined have overcome desktop visits. So that's a pretty big shift that we've seen in the last, I'd say, 6 years or so. So we offer that tool, and the benefit is that you all can get access to that tool, and I'll talk more about how that happens in just a bit. Secondly, we conduct trainings such as this one, but also we do our own monthly digital analytics program trainings on various different topics on basically how to use the tool, how to use other tools that are involved with web analytics, and sort of how to do analysis to create better user experiences from that. And you all will get information after this webinar along with the slides that will give you, we have a bunch of resources where you can access some of our documentation and training so that you all can learn that as well. Thirdly, we manage analytics.usa.gov, which is the public window into federal government analytics. So I can show it to you here. We have this dashboard where you can see a bunch of information about sort of how the public is interacting with federal government websites. And you can see on the right-hand side here, this is live. So there are 24,721 people right now checking their tax refund status results on irs.gov. Big surprise, right? 'Tis the season, I guess. But we maintain the site based on the data that we collect with Google Analytics, and you can also filter it down to specific agencies. So if you work at the Department of Justice and you want to see, for example, what operating systems or devices folks are visiting DOJ websites with, or what kind of files they're downloading, you can filter it for a specific agency. So we have all the cabinet level agencies as well as the post office that you can filter the data for. And finally, we have one-on-one support to the over 3,000 agency users that have access to our system to help facilitate that data influence decision making. So what I'll show you in just a bit, the sort of metrics and the information that you can get out of our system, in this case, specifically related to the privacy sections of your websites. If you have questions about it, you can email us, and we offer one-on-one support. Freddie is our customer service lead, and he does an incredible job sort of helping people learn how to create reports that are most beneficial to them. So the reason that DAP exists is because previously all this information was very, very siloed. So the Digital Analytics Program was created in 2012 with President Obama's digital government strategy at the time. And before the existence of the program, I kind of have a little schematic here, but I usually use the example of the Department of Health and Human Services. So HHS, obviously within HHS, we've got NIH and CDC and CMS and FDA and all these different sub-agencies. And each one of those sub-agencies operates many websites. As many of you may know, the sort of historical way that technology has been done in government is that, and especially related to websites, there were probably contracts for each one of those websites to be built. And in many cases, the contracts are probably held by various different companies. So if the CTO of NIH really wanted to understand what the most popular content folks were accessing on NIH websites was, there was really no good way to do that without having to chase down a bunch of different points of contact across the agency and get them to try to report. And often those reports weren't comparable because they were using different tools, or maybe there weren't web analytics tools on the site at all. So previously, you can see here, if you've got site 1, site 2, you might have all these different individual Google Analytics accounts. And in order to get reporting on them, you'd have to try to aggregate them all. And so that didn't work well, because I just used the example of NIH, and then if you scale that out to the level of HHS, and we want to say what are the most visited public web pages about health topics across all of HHS. Now we scope it out even from NIH to the full HHS agency. We're talking about hundreds of websites. We couldn't know. And then when you scope it out, obviously, to the entire government, the .gov world of federal websites, we just had no idea. So what the Digital Analytics Program does is takes all those individual Google Analytics accounts, and instead we asked agencies to implement the GSA managed Google Analytics account code, and all of the data goes into a unified account where we can now get data as micro level as a single click on a single web page, but scope it all the way out to trends across 5,000 federal government websites, such as the example I just gave you about mobile versus desktop visits. So that made us happy. And hopefully it will make you happy too. There's some numbers. I mentioned it was from the 2012 Digital Government Strategy. We have over 60 agencies participating, about 5,000 federal government sites, over 2.7 billion page views per month, with about I think we're at around 3,200 users now, and we get usually about 1,000 training attendees annually to our various different trainings. And here's a screenshot of analytics.usa.gov, which I showed you. And as you can see here, that I mentioned, we've got, oh, I'm still on justice. If I go now back to the homepage, across all of the government sites that we've got, 47.6% are currently, in the last 90 days, visits from desktop, whereas almost 47% are mobile and 5.5% are tablet. So that's the kind of large trend analysis that we can do. Another important one is looking at old versions of browsers, which costs a lot of money for agencies to be able to, they have to retrofit sites to render sites properly for, say, Internet Explorer 7. And now we can say only 0.6% of all sessions are coming via Internet Explorer 7, and so maybe we can stop supporting that. All right, so the grand scheme here is we use this data to get a better understanding of what our users are accessing and the pain points that they have and what kind of information they're looking to get, as well as how they're accessing that data, and then create better decision making through that data, and of course, create better experiences for the public. So you might be thinking, great, how does this pertain to me as a federal privacy professional? Well, I think the vast majority of you who are probably on this call, your agency websites and the privacy sections on those agency websites are probably, most of them, already participating in DAP, which means we have data on those sections. And so you can use the program to be able to understand which PIAs folks are looking at, which SORNs folks are looking at, what sections of your privacy section of your site are the most popular in terms of folks visiting, clicking on the pages or downloading files. So what we can do, and what I'm going to show you that I've done as a little bit of a template here, is you can understand which content's being viewed, learn where those visits are coming from. Are they coming from other websites who are linking to your resources? Are they mostly coming from Google searches? Things like that you'll see in the report that I'm going to demonstrate for you. I mentioned tracking PIA or other form downloads, and also when users click on other links outside your website. So when you have a link on your site that leads outside your site, we track that by default, and so you can check that. And I found that to be most useful in the case in the privacy community for SORNs, because they're all hosted on the Federal Register rather than on your agency website. So you'll see all this as I demo it. One thing I did want to note before I go too much further is that some of this may look very, very Greek to a lot of you, and that's okay. In the span of time that we have here, I surely don't have enough time to bring everyone up the learning curve of sort of how to use this tool. The purpose of this is really for me to show you what's possible. And so if you don't understand how I'm getting to some of the reports that I'm going to show you, don't fret. You're not intended to be able to understand it all at this point. But in the case that you're intrigued by this and you do want access and to learn how to create these reports yourself, we have all the resources for you and recorded trainings, and we'd be happy to help you with that. So firstly, I use the GSA privacy section, and thanks to Richard and Marcella for kind of allowing me to just do this. Every privacy section of a different agency website really works a bit differently in terms of how the URLs are structured. So I'm going to use the example of GSA.gov. It's probably different at your site, but you can adjust the way we do the reports to make it work for your site. In this case, this is the privacy program section of the GSA site. You can see in the URL here, we've got gsa.gov/reference/GSA Privacy Program. And that's something that's consistent throughout all the different sections or the resources that they offer in this, this directory of the site. And so that's great. That's what we want to see. There's a common thread here, GSA-privacy-program. And so if I go down to read about the Privacy Act, it still has that start, and then it gives me the more information about the page I've clicked on. And so we've got the PIA page and so on. I can click throughout. We've got at least this constant. So what we're able to do when we have sort of this correct taxonomy of the way the site is built is that we can say, okay, well, I want a report that shows me certain metrics for all the pages on gsa.gov that contain GSA-privacy-program. And so I was able to do that here. Now, this is the Google Analytics, the DAP Google Analytics account. You can see I'm in what we call the GSA agency profile. So every agency that participates in the program has their own profile. So if you worked at NARA, for example, you would get this information in the NARA profile because the NARA profile contains data from NARA websites. So I'm in the GSA profile. I've got the date set for about 2 months worth of data here. You can also control which dates you want to see data for. And I'm just going to briefly sort of show you how I've set up this report. I've picked some metrics, one of them being page views. So that's every time the page is loaded. I've also picked average time on page, and I've picked entrances. And I'll talk a little bit more about entrances in a moment. And then I'm setting the dimension, which is page. So that's the URL. So it's going to display a listing, a chart of all the pages, and then give me page views, average time on page, and how many times that page was entered. And I've set up a filter that specifies GSA.gov and GSA Privacy Program. I think this will make sense when you see it. Ugh. Of course, Google decides to be slow the day we have a presentation. So what we've got here is here's our report. And you can see all of the pages contain GSA Privacy Program because I set the filter to specify for that. And then the three metrics that I picked were page views, average time on page, and entrances. We've got 31 total rows here. It only shows the first 10 off the first report, but we can expand it. So these are all the GSA Privacy Program pages. And what we can see here is that this particular page, the page for Rules and Policies Protecting PII and the Privacy Act, had by far the most total page views, 8,524 page views in the last 2 months. But one thing that we can see with these other metrics that's interesting is that most folks only stayed on that page for a shorter period of time. The average time on page is 1 minute, 25 seconds. So while this page is by far the most viewed of the section, the time on page shows us that actually this second most viewed page, the Privacy Laws and Regulations, has a much longer average duration for folks to be on. And maybe that's because it just has more text to read. Not sure, but that one has almost a 5-minute average time on page. So you can see how this might be beneficial. This is like the most basic report, but if you've never looked at something like this before, you might not have any idea which is the most commonly accessed of the pages within your privacy section. So working as a privacy officer or in the federal privacy community, I think it's very beneficial for you to know which are the most viewed pages of your section. So let's talk about entrances here. An entrance is when this particular page was the first page of a session, meaning the user would get to the page, and the first page on GSA Gov that they'd see is whatever's listed here. So there were 8,524 total page views, meaning someone could have gotten to gsa.gov, clicked onto the privacy section from there, and then clicked on this particular PII Privacy Act page. But 6,976 of them saw this particular page as the first one. So that is a really interesting stat, because what that's saying is that folks are coming to gsa.gov specifically to view this page. The vast majority of the times this page had a page view, it was the first page of the session, meaning that folks weren't navigating to it from other parts of the website. This must be something that folks are searching for. And the same thing with many of these other ones. 2,600 of 3,100 total for the second one were the first page of or what we call the landing page of a session. So based on that, I wanted to do some research to find out, okay, well, where are these visits coming from? If 7/8 or so of all the page views for this page were coming as the first page that someone would view, how do they get there? And so I went to our second report, and let me just backtrack a bit here. On each of these reports that I'm showing you, I've included a template link. So if you decide that you want to become a digital analytics program user after this presentation, you can, after you get access, you can come back and click on these templates, and they will preload this report for you. You will have to probably change the filter a bit to specify for your website, but we'd be happy to help you with that, and there are links in all of these. So we looked at total traffic. Okay, where are these users coming from? So I created a report that, again, focused specifically on the individual pages, but I specifically said that I wanted to see only when it was the first page of the landing, or I'm sorry, the first page of the session. So when this was the landing page. So in this sense, this Protecting PII Privacy Act we saw before, 6,975 times in the last 2 months. It was the first page someone saw on GSA Gov. So then what I did is I structured this report so that you could click into an individual page and you could see where those visits were coming from. And hopefully it'll open for me. So most of them, 71% of them, were coming from organic searches on Google. The second most popular source of traffic was from Bing, which is another organic search. And then this direct would mean theoretically that folks were going directly to that page by either a bookmark or typing it in the URL bar. That's a kind of interesting one. There's some caveats to that. But one of the ones that was most interesting to me was, these are all search engines, Yahoo, Bing, Google. So people are searching a lot for this. But this one was kind of interesting. A referral from cdss.ca.gov. So I structured this report so that you could further click. And here's, if we click even further, it will give you not only the website that referred the traffic, but the specific page. So if I check this out, got cdss.ca.gov. And so this is the state of California Department of Social Services, I believe. And they've got something over here, federal information, rules and policies, protecting PII, the Privacy Act. So this is a link to the gsa.gov page that we were just looking at, that potentially Richard, or in the case of you all looking at your own agency sites, you can find links to your resources that you might not have known existed on other websites. And so I think that's a really potential value add for you all to see, well, where are our resources being referenced in other websites? So that's something that I also include in my little package in the slides here, so that you all can take a look and see where those visits are coming from. Now, one thing I did want to mention to you all is, some of you might be thinking, okay, well, if people got to this page via google.com, how can we find out what keywords people were using to get to that page? As in, what did folks search on google.com that eventually led them to that particular page, which I should probably see. It's right here, I think. So this is the one that we've been looking at, the most visited. Unfortunately, Google Analytics doesn't have a good way of giving you the search keywords, but there is a tool that you can use called Google Search Console. And Google Search Console is another tool that Google offers that will record the words, the keywords that people search on google.com. So you could, assuming that you use that tool, you'd be able to find out which keywords people were using that led to this specific page that made them click. So just for reference for all of you. But if you use these, you can see there are a few more referrals where it led a few visits to that particular page. So this template will also be there for you. Okay, moving on. Now this is where it sort of gets fun. I wanted to try to create a report to be able to find out how many times folks were downloading specific PIAs. And so that's obviously related to the privacy impact assessment page here. And I did sort of cross-reference not only on the GSA site, but I also took a look at, I think, the state.gov site. Let me try to see if I can find it here. So I did take a look just to see, and it looks like it's about the same way. They list all their PIAs here, and if you, I know it's probably small for you, but in the bottom left of my screen, as I hover over these, it shows me where the particular document is located, and these are all hosted within state.gov as PDFs. And I think that's the same thing here in GSA. We've got, we've got a bunch of PDFs. And in some cases, I think there are also some Word documents that are the PIAs that are hosted here. So one of the benefits of the Digital Analytics program is that we have automatically encoded into our program anytime there's a file download of any of the most popular file types. So PDF, doc, XLS, even image files, JPEGs, PNGs, things like that. We record that particular click. So because this page has the Digital Analytics program running on it, the script that fires GSA, or I'm sorry, fires Google Analytics, we can record when these particular files are downloaded. So again, I can show you a little bit about what this looks like, but basically we have some specific events, and I specified that it had to be on the page with PIAs, and I specified the kind of events. And so in this case, we're looking at downloads and what we call outbound downloads. Again, not something I expect you to be able to replicate based on a short discussion here. But when you do that, we've got this report that we can see. Now notice if the URL has a space in it. Let's see, it's like design research, I think, is the one. So there are some spaces in the URL destination for this. It's design space research PIA. So Google Analytics will actually add ampersands in there, or I'm sorry, percent symbols. So when you see percent signs, it just means there was a space. %20 just means a space. So in this case, we've got the design research PIA. In the last 2 months has been downloaded 23 times. So that's the most popular one. But we can also see all of them. There are 47 total. And in this sort of short time period we're looking at, the last 2 months, you can see which are the PIAs that were drawing the most interest that folks wanted to download and take a look at. And then similarly, I've got over here, after we took a look at that, I thought, okay, well, not that I am an expert in the privacy field, I am not at all, but it seems to me like two of the really most popular or important things to know that your users are being able to access are not only the PIAs, but also the SORNs. So I went to the GSA SORN page, and oops, where is it? Here it is. So here's the page where you would download all the SORNs. And again, I cross-referenced this, and I think it's pretty similar in the State Department site. Again, there they are. But what's different here is that unlike the PIAs, which are hosted at GSA.gov, they're just files. These, because of the way systems of records notices are done, they're not hosted at GSA.gov. They're actually hosted on the Federal Register. And they're not files per se. They're just links that link out. If I click on this, it will link me to federalregister.gov. And the text is, you can download it from Federal Register, but it's also, you can get it in basic text here. So going from the GSA website out to federalregister.gov, we have to track that a little bit differently. But luckily, again, the Digital Analytics program has the capability to be able to track what we call outbound links. And the way it does that is basically in our Google Analytics code, we set a listener for links that says, if you see a link that leads out of the domain, so in this case, out of gsa.gov, when someone clicks on that link, just make a note of that. And then as a result of the fact that we record outbound links, we can again set a specific report that focuses on this particular web page, on the SORN page, and record how many times these links were clicked. So I've done just that. I had to set up this report a bit differently because we needed to be able to combine the domain with the rest of the URL. So I've set up a couple columns here that you can see it. And what we've got here are, in the last 2 months, obviously you can see here federalregister.gov. That's the case for all of them because that's where all the SORNs are hosted. And we've got, oh, this was something that I discovered. So unlike the sort of really friendly URL structure that GSA.gov has for its privacy section. So as an example, if I click on Privacy Act of 1974, the URL tells me what the page is because it says Privacy Act of 1974. When I first did this, this report, I was looking at the results, and unfortunately what I found is that federalregister.gov is not as friendly. So what we know is somebody clicked on this particular page, but just looking at it, we can't tell what it is because all of the SORNs follow a similar pattern where it ends with Privacy Act of 1974 Notice of Updated Systems of Records, and it has the date it was created and some sort of identifier number. In this case, it's E8-883. So unfortunately, to find out which one this is exactly, we would have to type in federalregister.gov and then add this on. Now I can see, okay, which one is this? It looks like it's maybe something that's more overarching. But anyways, in order for you to be able to find out which SORN it's referencing, oh, here it is, the GSA Smart Page Purchase Card Program. So yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't say GSA Smart Card Purchase Program. It just has E8-883. So bummer, but at least you could do some cross-referencing and find out, okay, well, if you have a SORN that's been clicked on a heck of a lot of times, it might be worth your while to go check out and cross-reference and see which one is which. But I thought this could be pretty illuminating, especially for those folks that, you know, really had no idea how often these particular resources were being accessed, whether they be SORNs or PIAs or even just the pages themselves. I know that a lot of agencies, if you're working in the privacy department, you might not have a lot of communication with the folks who are typically looking at things like Google Analytics. And so this program, our program, allows you to be able to access this information for yourself rather than have to ask someone to give it to you. So that's kind of a little bit about what DAP can do and how it can benefit, hopefully, you all in the privacy world. My requisite GIF here is Bill and Ted. It's not bad, right? It's pretty cool. I'm really, really proud to work on this program, and I think we help a lot of agencies really understand their users better and hopefully make decisions that help their users because of that. So if you are interested in getting access to DAP, or if you're wondering if your site participates in the program at all, you can email us, and I've included our email address here, dap@support.digitalgov.gov. And basically the process is this: if you're requesting access, every agency has a designated DAP point of contact that we work with. And you can be a federal employee or you can be a contractor, as long as you have the federal point of contact's approval. And we'll respond to you with a little registration form that you fill out. And after you fill that out, assuming you get approval from your agency point of contact, we'll grant you access. And you can go in and all this data will be available to you. We also will include in that package a bunch of introductory training courses that we've done in the past, so that you can learn a little bit about how the system works and how to create these reports. As I noted, it'll take you a little while to get to the point before you can sort of create these all on your own, but it's really, really powerful if you take the time to get through the learning curve for Google Analytics. And as I noted, I've included templates for all of them, so that you can actually, once you have access, replicate them much more easy than creating them all on your own. So the last thing I want to talk about here is sort of not talking about the digital analytics program, Google Analytics account specifically, but just talking about web analytics tools in general. Richard kind of asked me to touch on some aspects that might be worth consideration for the federal privacy community. So since I'm a little bit of a subject matter expert on Google Analytics, I can talk about things that I've seen and things that might be worth your consideration. So the first thing is your agency collecting IP addresses? And if so, is that desired? So I should preface this with the fact that in most cases, even the agencies and websites that participate in the digital analytics program, it's the DAP Google Analytics account is usually not the only Google Analytics account on the website. It's usually a secondary account that some folks use for the value add that it provides, because we pay for our version, so it has some special features. But most websites in the federal government that Freddie and I work with not only use DAP, but they also have an independent, individually agency-managed Google Analytics free account, and they run concurrently. So what I'm referring to here is these things are possible considerations for the Google Analytics accounts that are being run on your agency websites that are not the DAP accounts. And I'll kind of explain how DAP combats each one of these three things. So firstly, IP addresses. If you implement a Google Analytics account out of the box, free version, by default, it does collect IP addresses. And that's a good thing in some senses, that you can, for example, filter out traffic coming from within your agency. So within the system, you can say, okay, we know our range of IP addresses within our particular agency, and we want to filter those out. So that's a desirable function, sure. But the general question is that something that you want to be doing with that system? So the Google Analytics, the DAP Google Analytics account, we anonymize all IP addresses, mainly because there's definitely not a consensus about whether or not IP addresses constitute a portion of PII, but that was a choice we made because we were a shared service across government. We anonymize all IP addresses, and so there's nothing stored in terms of an IP. So that's something that you just might want to look into if you know that there are independent managed Google Analytics accounts on your agency's websites. The second thing, is the data in the Google Analytics account being shared with Google for marketing purposes? So when you initially create a Google Analytics account, there's actually some settings that you go through, and there's a spot, I think it's here. Yes. So there's a spot here. So you can see this particular page. This is the initial sort of settings for the account. And there are all these different options where you can share Google Analytics data with various different services. So Google products and services, for benchmarking, for technical support, and for account specialists. I'm not saying that there's any which way that is the correct way. Obviously, every agency deems their own data sharing practices, but we basically only check the box for technical support, and we have chosen not to use the Google products and services, which in some cases, links to some things that I think could be used for marketing. So just something that you all might want to have in mind if you come across independently managed Google Analytics accounts. Which of these are checked, and what does that mean? And finally, is your agency inadvertently collecting PII via query parameters? So this one basically is, if for those of you that are unfamiliar with what query parameters are, if you ever see a URL and it has a question mark in it, and often you'll see this like anytime you see, especially in social media, if there are organizations that are doing outreach via social media, they'll have all of these query parameters in here that'll say like UTM medium and UTM source. Now, UTM medium and UTM source are specific to Google Analytics, and they're not really any risk of PII. But anytime there are these strings of letters after a question mark, that's called a query parameter. And what they do is they basically send systems information. And so one of the most common uses of a query parameter is on site searches. So if I do a site search here, we'll just see if this works. So here you go. So you can see here this says query equals test. And so that basically told the on-site search page to provide a search engine results for the query of test. But you might have query parameters that send things to all different kinds of tools. So in some cases, we have seen where accidentally there could be a search box where you find locations of, this is just a random example, but maybe like where the passports or something like that, like where to find a passport agency. And in that search, you could, for example, put in your address, and it would show you where the closest passport physical location would be. This is not just a made-up story. But in the case that that would happen, in some cases, we might see a query parameter that says address equals, and then, oops, I spelled address wrong. But we might see address equals, and it sends an actual address in this area here that would then signal to the application to use that as the center point for finding the locations, which obviously you want to be able to send people to the correct locations. But if accidentally, or not accidentally, but maybe inadvertently, there's PII that's being sent through this query parameter, in some cases it can be collected by Google Analytics in the as the URL, because it's the URL that's being used. So definitely something to think about. If you are ever looking at your agency website and you see that there's a query parameter that collects PII, there are very special things that you can do in Google Analytics to prevent that collection. In the case of DAP, what we've done is we basically block all query parameters from coming into our system unless we specifically whitelist them. So in some cases, agencies request that we keep some query parameter information in the URL string, so that way they can make use of it and do analysis. And so we can do that for them. But we've taken the action to actually blacklist everything unless we put it on the whitelist. And so in the cases of independently managed Google Analytics accounts, I think that it's possible that there are places where there's a collection of PII that probably maybe the folks that manage the website don't even really realize that's happening. My recommendation for this would be obviously adjust the Google Analytics settings, but also just don't have systems that record PII in a URL. The query parameters that collect PII, it's just not the best practice. So something also for consideration for web analytics. All right, so we showed you a little bit about what the digital analytics program can do. Hopefully you're interested in that. It's really much broader than even what I was able to show you today in this short period of time. And then we also, obviously talked a little bit about these considerations as you're dealing with folks in your agencies who might be managing websites, and especially if they have independently manage Google Analytics accounts, some considerations for the federal privacy community. So with that, I wanted to leave some time to make sure that we could answer questions. While I've been talking, I don't know how active the chat box has been, but Freddie, are there questions that folks had that you feel would be good to address to the whole group?
Yeah, we have one main question, not a whole lot of interaction in the chat room today, unfortunately. But the main question is, are there any recent examples of government agencies making changes to their sites based on DAP data? And if so, can we recall any examples?
Sure. So the example that I think is the easiest to explain and one of the most impactful is FTC. So if I go to ftc.gov, hopefully they haven't changed their site on me in the last couple of weeks. Well, it's taking a little bit to load here. Well, while that's loading, I will tell the story. So ftc.gov previously had on their homepage a really big, what they call a slider, which is a place where there's a large photo that slides and shows different, they're highlighting basically some visuals. And it was taking up the vast majority of the homepage. I don't know why this isn't loading. Federal, oh, there, it loaded. Okay. So this, what you can see here, this slider, it used to take up basically this entire span where it's white. And this was the majority of what you could see when you landed on the homepage. So what FTC did was they used the Digital Analytics Program data, and they did an analysis of on-site search terms. So one of the things that DAP does is it can collect the queries from your on-site search box. Now, remember I told you it doesn't have a very good data set for the keywords that people are putting into Google. But if they come to your actual website, you can track the queries that folks are putting in that they're looking for more information. So FTC did an analysis of their site searches, and they found that basically there were 6 main things that folks were coming to the homepage and searching for. And here are the 6 things. And then they did a little bit of analysis on how many clicks it took for the user to get to each one of these things. And some of them were as easy as like 2 clicks away. Like you had to hover over one of these menus and then come down here and click on something, but it wasn't visible right from the homepage. Some of them were more than 2 clicks away, as in you couldn't even get to it from one of these little menus here. So they did analysis of all these search terms. They found out there were mainly these 6 main things that people were using different terms to do. And they said, okay, well, let's do something about it. So they cut down this slider into a little bit of a smaller section, and they added this take action section right here. And what they found is they were able to do some really good before and after metrics and analysis on this. The percentage increase of getting to these pages and completing these tasks went up hundreds of percent after they put the take action box here, because folks either didn't really want to search for things using the search box, or they didn't want to find things by scrolling through a bunch of different menus. And so by taking the 6 most popular action items that folks wanted to complete and making them really easily visible as soon as you land on the homepage, they increased their conversion rate of completing those tasks by a really, really significant amount. So that's sort of my bread and butter DAP success story. And I've told the folks at FTC that I talk about them a lot. So kudos to the FTC folks for doing a relatively simple analysis, but then being able to take the hard action, which is updating the website to actually create a change that was better for the user.
Awesome, great. We have one more question that just came in. You mentioned there's a POC for each agency. How do I find out the POC for the agency I support?
Well, you can email us at the dap@support.digitalgov.gov. That's an email address right there. And if you're requesting access, we will copy your agency POC. I think in some cases, depending on which agency you're in, you may or may not know that person. We have the agency POC at a pretty high level. In some cases, it's like the whole cabinet agency has one POC. So much easier just to probably email us and we can connect you and get you the approval that you need. In a lot of cases, the POCs just want to make sure that it's a current employee and that they have the correct agency email address and things like that. Any other questions, Freddie?
Nope, that is all the questions we have today.
Okay, awesome. Well, in that case, see if I have got a final slide here. Well, I've got some resources. And again, one thing that I wanted to mention is that after this this broadcast is over, number one, we will have a recorded, it is being recorded, so we will have the URL for you to access and reference if you'd like, or send this to some of your colleagues if they couldn't attend today. That will be included in the follow-up email. Also, we'll have a bunch of resources to DAP information and training if you're interested in learning more. And finally, there will be a satisfaction survey. And if we could just ask you to take the 2 minutes to answer, I think it's 6 questions, that would really, really help us. We obviously want to make sure that we're spending time creating training that's beneficial to you all. So really, really beneficial if you could help us out by filling that out. And please feel free to put any feedback you had, whether it be for us at the DAP team or for Richard or Marcella for the GSA Privacy folks. Happy to sort of take any of that and try to do the best we can with it. With that, I guess we'll end a few minutes early, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you so much to Richard and Marcella, as well as the DigitalGov University team, and as always, my partner in crime, Freddie. Hopefully this was valuable to you, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Have a great rest of the week, folks.